All right, so we're going to start with more of a community update, then we're going to do then we're going to do some Cocos core update and Cocos kernel update.
Ready. No white screen. Excellent.
Yeah. All right, so the first thing that you might have noticed is we had some change in the leadership. So now we are welcoming Julien Bigot from CEA on the leadership team, and we would like to take a minute to thank Siva from Sandia, who's moving on to Genesis project. So with this, that makes that. Did you want to say anything? No. This makes that was the last thing really that we were missing to be a candidate to a core project. So we are gonna officially go to the Technical Advisory Council, and hopefully next year when we meet, we will be a core project next to Spark. So we didn't want to rush everything because it's not just about getting a pin. We had to improve processes. Hopefully, since we've joined HPSF, you have already noticed that we're getting our ducks in order slowly. You know, we have better contributing guide, that we try to be more transparent about how we function and whatnot. But yeah, we're pretty happy to now be ready to become a core project. Okay, so we wanted to tell you a bit more about the Cocos working groups. So you've seen, you probably heard HPSF has its own working groups, but we around the same time we decided we also needed more focused effort in the ecosystem. And you can probably notice that we also have a continuous integration working group, which is specifically targeted at improving our practices in the Cocos ecosystem and maintain our testing. You might have seen, if you missed it, you can probably catch it later on YouTube. We had a talk specifically on it, how we ensure we have enough redundancy and whatnot. So one thing I really wanted to highlight is that these working groups are really open to people from the ecosystem. So for instance, the continuous integration working group is looking more and more about integration testing with the rest of the ecosystem. So we've been working tightly with Trillinos, but I think we're going to be soon in a position where we would like to work with more project and actually get feedback faster when things change and we should know about it. So we have a build and packaging working group that's, you know, work on our build system, make sure that you can do all the crazy things you would want to do with Cocos, and they also collaborate with Spark to try to deploy more efficiently. This one, it's been great. We've been having some people from the Spark team coming with us to improve the build system. Same thing here. If you're interested, just let us know. So the way you hear more about this working groups is you go on our website and you go to community and you'll find the working groups page. It will succinctly describe to you what the goal for these working groups. And you can contact the chair. They usually have instruction if you're interested. And so the latest working groups that we're spinning up, it's brand new. It's one about training and education. And hopefully some of you guys are going to be interested in that subject. And as Conrad said, we're going to have more discussion about education and training later today. Just throwing it out there, some of the things we're interested in, interoperability and benchmarking, they're going to come in the next couple of years, but if there are specific themes you're interested in and you want to get involved with us, you know, you don't need to be a Cocos developer, just reach out and maybe you can help leading the formation of these working groups.
So two projects, you know, in the larger ecosystem which have made quite a bit of strides recently is Cocos FFT and Cocos Com. You will hear about both of them tomorrow in more detail, but we wanted to just point out, that that's, in our growing ecosystem, that's something, which is, had made quite a bit progress over last year. Cocos FFT had its first release. This is, as the name you probably can guess is, it's for fast Fourier transformations. The good thing is, you don't need to pull out raw pointers out of your Cocos view and figure out, what the sizes are, etc. You can just pass the views to the interface, and then it targets underneath, things like QFFT, FFTW, etc. Cocos FFT is ready for users, right? That's something where we think, this is stable enough now that a lot of users could start really using it. And, we would really welcome that. Cocos.com, similar effort, make sure that you can call things like MPI without going through like raw pointer extraction, etc. That is still in a pre-release state, but it's in a state where we think it's usable for most people, and we'd like some early users, to really try this out, give feedback, etc. Again, there is a presentation tomorrow on that where you get more details about what's going on. But I really want, folks to look at that and, potentially in the long run, right, stop doing their own wrappers for all of these things, because I feel that's a lot of like wasted resources.
Okay. So if you've seen the presentation on Monday, you were aware of this. But so we're holding developer meetings, and we had one last week, and I wanted to take a minute to give you more details than I did on Monday on what happened, and so that you have a feel for what we're thinking and what's coming in the near horizon. So for those who missed it, it was in Albuquerque last week. So 14 of us in person and some of us virtual. And so we do this because we still think that it matters nowadays to be able to come together and focus on stuff. So one important part that we do is we do retrospectives to try to see what we're doing well and what we could improve. We do some planning and some team building. And so I'm going to dive into a few details of the discussions that I think are of interest.
So one discussion we had, and that's something we feel is, I think a lot of open source projects are starting to, think about, is what's our policies around AI use, AI contributions, etc. I don't know how much you guys have followed, like some of these open source discussions, right? There's, various projects which have done various different approaches to how we deal with AI. There's a couple problems all of us are dealing with AI, right? I mean, it's coming, we are encouraged to leverage it, right? In particular in industry, I think there's a lot of pressure to, use AI to get more efficiency, etc. out. But there is some problems coming with that, right? Like one of the big issues is that, AI coding, for example, does reduce the cost, the time it takes to generate code, right? But what does that now mean for us, right? When we try to review things, right? There is a risk, that people just generate code, push PRs out, and we can't keep up with like reviewing at the kind of quality level we want to do that, right? And we've seen that in some other open source projects where just like random folks, right, come along and push out, here's an AI contribution, and then complain if it doesn't get reviewed and doesn't get merged, right? We even have seen like almost autonomous bots, which were instructed, look for scientific software which has problems and submit PRs in my name, right? And, how do you deal with that, right? Another problem is, and that's certainly way bigger than our project, concerns around copyright and licensing things, right? AI seems to a certain degree to be one huge like copyright violation. You know, it scraped the internet for information, and we've seen reports, you know, like papers where we said like, oh, you know, you can actually coax one of these large language models to more or less verbatim reproduce all of the Harry Potter book, right? So how do we know that an AI-generated code is not actually some copied code, you know, or reproduced code from, say, something with GPL license, you know, which wouldn't be allowed to be contributed into our code base, you know, under Apache 2. I don't think we know, right? But and I don't think, you know, it's something. So in the end, we said in this discussion, you know, it's not something we're gonna be worrying too much about, because if eventually there's some lawsuit coming down which says all of this is illegal, right? I think there's bigger problems than you know, going after the Cocos team. But what we do want to do is we want to track things. That's something I think we agreed on, saying like, you know, if you generate code with AI, if you use it, you know, to a large degree in certain contributions, we want that tracked in the commit that was done. Another problem, anyone with Copilot account, right, on GitHub can request AI reviews on any public repo, right? You can just go anywhere, click on, say, like, make the Copilot review things, and have that, right? Now, depending on how this stuff is set up, right, these reviews can be more or less useful. But one thing we don't want is we don't want to be overwhelmed with that, right? Like, so we have, for example, discussed that that only core developers are allowed to request that. And if somebody else does that, right, we're gonna tell them politely, you know, please refrain from doing this on our repos. Another big problem I see is, you know, like human nature is when, you know, something goes well for a while, right, our vigilance goes down. And from our early experience with AI tools is that, you know, most of the time it does a pretty decent job, right? And sometimes it then screws really up, right? And has like subtle, significant issues. And it's a big concern of mine in particular that over time we trust these tools more, but, you know, because it's 95% of the time it's good. And that makes us, you know, less vigilant to find these last 5% of bugs, and we are introducing more bugs than we would have before. So that's something where, you know, we really have to figure out, you know, how do we want to deal with that. This is in early discussions, right? Eventually, I think we will have like a formal written policy around this with guidelines, you know. But if you have feedback, if you want to be involved in that discussion, you know, contact us on Slack, and you know, I think this is something we as a larger community need to figure out.
All right, so about the ecosystem now. So you might have noticed we have over a dozen sub-projects that live publicly under the Cocos organization. And we want to make an effort to help you navigate this jungle. So you're probably most familiar with Cocos Core, which is a Cocos repo that gives you the programming model and the foundational data structure and whatnot. The Cocos kernels, math libraries is also you know, a library that has production level. We release in lockstep. So every time, like the upcoming 5.1, you used to see both of them releasing at the same time. They're both snapshot into Trillinos. But we want to get our ducks in orders with the rest. So for instance, Cocos tools, hopefully you're aware that it exists and you've been using it. We're gonna do an effort so that we will actually do releases and bring it also in lockstep with Cocos to, even though in principle it works with older version, we want to make our message a bit easier to understand. So Christian already spoke to newer efforts like Cocos FFT and CocosCom, in particular Cocos FFT, that's becoming more and more mature. So you're probably aware that there'll be more talk about, there's interoperability efforts, the Fortran interop repository. There is PyCocos. There's stuff like MDSpan, and so we're going to work on developing some internal Cocos-specific life cycle for sub-projects. So we will try to communicate clearly the level of maturity of this project. So more to come. If you're interested, you can reach out as well. One thing I wanted to highlight is we had thought about it for a while and discussed, but we are more seriously now considering integrating some external projects such as Arborex, which is an spatial indexing project, Cabana, which is a library that does support for particle-based simulation, and DDC, discrete. Yeah, I'm blanking, but discrete domain computation, yeah, from CEA, which is also reaching a good level of maturity. And so we're gonna, as we develop this life cycle, we're gonna try to carve them a place and possibly being able to welcome them into the ecosystem.
So another thing we want to remind people again, right? We've over last year we updated that a little bit. The question of how to cite Cocos, right? This is something which is important to us. You know, tracking impact of our projects is always a little bit difficult, right? But it's important to justify funding in different institutions. One of the things we improved is we are trying to ensure or help with reproducibility of work which is based on Cocos. So one of the things we introduced is the version-specific citations for Cocos core and Cocos kernels. That's something we've done via the Zenodo platform. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Basically, you can kind of register your project there, and you can generate kind of DOIs for specific versions of your, each specific release of your project, and without needing to write a journal paper or something like that for every release. And so the goal here would be that people who use Cocos, right, you would cite potentially the relevant journal papers, but also the Zenodo kind of DOI for the specific version you used, and that can help with reproducibility of your work, by saying yes, this is exactly what we used, right? Yeah. So go to Cocos.org, citing Cocos. That's where we will update things. You will also find information about the larger ecosystem there, right? So you find journal papers where you're supposed to cite for sub-projects, for example. And we definitely encourage you to do so. That's generally helpful to us, and maintaining the funding stream we need to make Cocos or keep Cocos working.
So here I wanted to increase awareness about some of the seminar series we have. So just out of curiosity, who on here has called into any of these tea time that we run? Okay. So this was initiated by our friends from CEA, which explain the early day, but generally we're trying to grow beyond our US base, and so because of this, it becomes challenging to find times. But so this release series is quite good. Not really, sorry. Talk series. We record if it's too early for you or you have meetings. We record them thanks to the Linux Foundation platform, and you can go and watch them. But so if you didn't know about them, you should think about joining. And also, if you're interested in, sharing some exciting things that you've been doing, some pattern that you've been developing with Cocos, good use, just reach out, and we'd be happy to host you on the series.
Yeah. Beyond that, right? I mean, I assume most of you are aware of our Slack channel, right? Our primary communication channel. But one thing we recently did is we introduced also mailing lists for like announcements, you know, like release announcements, links for, you know, invites for like release briefings and other kind of like presentations and stuff like that. You know, please join those, right? That way you can, you know, keep up to date with those announcements and actually get them into your inbox, you know, with potentially actually, you know, the Outlook or whatever other calendar invite instead of, you know, just the Slack message which says, hey, we're gonna meet, right? Which is easy to overlook. So, you know, we hope that helps the community to stay a bit more informed about, you know, what's going on with the project.
All right. And so finally, so we have had for a while a blog post that we were not really taking advantage of. Since last year, we've been trying to force ourselves to communicate a bit more. So there is, for instance, if you haven't looked, there was one blog post on about the behind the scene of some of the major overhaul for the Cocos View. There was one recently on how to profile on AMD with the newer toolchains, this kind of thing. So we're going to try to be a bit more active there. So if you weren't aware, you should look in that corner. And one thing we would like to do, and you might be able to help us, is we would like to start integrating more user stories. So if you want to showcase some of the things you've been doing, that's another thing where we might reach out, but you know, everything is hosted on GitHub. You can even do a pull request against our blog and propose something, and we'll be happy to host it.